Welcome to this special episode of Founding Fuel Meet the Author. Today, we have a fascinating conversation lined up on the art of powerful communication, how words can inspire, lead, and make a lasting impact. I'm delighted to introduce our guest, Terry Szuplat. Terry served as the senior speechwriter to President Barack Obama, helping craft some of the most memorable speeches of his presidency. He's now the author of Say It Well, a book filled with timeless lessons on how to connect with audiences and move them to action. Welcome, Terry.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Great to have you. Joining Terry in conversation is D Shivakumar, a veteran business leader, best-selling author, and one of India's most respected voices on leadership and communication. And he's also, of course, a contributor to Founding Fuel. So welcome, Shiv, as well.
Thank you, IG. It's a pleasure always to do this with Founding Fuel.
Thank you. In the next 30 minutes, Terry and Shiv will explore the craft of great speeches, the power of storytelling, and what business leaders can learn from the world's most influential communicators. And with that, let's dive in. Shiv, over to you.
Yes. Thank you, Terry, for joining us. It's a wonderful book, Say It Well. I really enjoyed it. And that's why I picked it as one of the top 10 books of the summer season. My first question to you, Terry, is how is public speaking different for a politician vis-a-vis a business leader?
First of all, thank you so much for selecting the book. I'm thrilled that it resonated with you. It was something I was trying to write, not just for Americans, but for folks all over the world, because a lot of it is based on traveling with the President Obama to more than 40 countries, including India. And actually, one of the stories I tell in the book is how we worked on his speech to the Indian Parliament, and that was something that was very important to us and to me. And so I was thrilled to be able to share that story in the book as well. You know, when I first heard about your question here, it's interesting. My mind generally gravitates towards what business speeches by business leaders and politicians have in common. One of the things I talk about in the book are just fundamentals of communication that are true, whether it's in business, philanthropy, politics, government, advocacy, whether you're a startup, an entrepreneur of a political party, or a startup, an entrepreneur of an NGO or of a social impact organization. I think a lot of the fundamentals, knowing your audience, connecting with them emotionally on a human level, telling powerful stories about the people you're trying to help and change their lives. These are all sort of fundamentals that are true both in business and in politics and whatever field you're in. And that's sort of what I focus on in the book. But I mean, you did ask what's one important difference. You know, I think and I hope that whereas politicians sadly are often trying to, you know, have a foil, trying to sadly demonize the other side a lot of times and you know, create a specter of fear. You know, if the other person wins, your life will be terrible. There's less of that, of course, in business. Now, in business, you still might have a foil. You might have a competitor, and you're trying to motivate and inspire your employees to work harder, to work faster, to work better, because there's maybe a challenger who's nipping at your heels. So there's still some of that. But I think for the most part, the fundamentals are actually, I think, are quite common. I spent most of my years writing in the political and government space and then transitioned to business. And I actually found it much more of a seamless transition than I expected, because I think the fundamentals of, you know, how to connect with another person that I describe in the book are true no matter what field you're in.
Okay, thank you much, Terry. My next question is, you've been an outstanding speechwriter. You've been a long-serving speechwriter for President Obama. What is the difference between writing a great speech and delivering a great speech?
Sure. There is a difference. Thank you for asking that. So yeah, I spent more than 25 years helping other people prepare their speeches. So I got pretty good at writing speeches. And then I was mostly behind the scenes writing words for other people. I wasn't giving many speeches myself. When I left the White House, I suddenly had the opportunity to start giving speeches myself. And sometimes it went okay, and sometimes it did not. Sometimes it was a kind of a disaster. And I talk about that in the book. One of the themes of the book is how I sort of, like a lot of people, had to sort of find my own voice and figure out where I could contribute and what my kind of angle was, where I could make a difference. And so I think I had to go through that process as well. I knew how to write a speech. I didn't really know how to give one, really. And so I think there's so many things that I share in the book, tips for public speaking, how to prepare, how to rehearse, how to get ready in those final hours and minutes before you take the podium or grab the microphone, and then various things you can do in terms of breathing and hand gestures and body language that you can do in the moment. But the biggest piece of advice and the simplest piece of advice I would give folks is this piece of advice that President Obama gave me when I asked him once, what do you think makes a compelling public speaker? I'm amazed no one had ever asked him this. In all these years, he's this great public speaker. What did he think makes a great public speaker? And I'll never forget this. I share this in the book. I thought he was going to talk about, delivery or body language or narrative arc and structure and all these things that he cared deeply about. But the number one thing he told me was, and I would tell your listeners, is that he said, to me, the most effective public speakers are people who know who they are, know what they believe, and speak from a place of conviction. And I thought that was really powerful, because I think we've all heard speakers, both in political space, but business, and you're listening to them and you're just like, I'm not sure they even believe what they're saying right now. Are they just reading something that was given to them by a staffer or their company? Their heart doesn't seem to be in it. And so I think one of the lessons of the book that I share is that, you have to you can't just get up and, read a speech. I encourage people to think deeply about their values and their mission and their purpose and what they're trying to achieve in their company, in their movement, in their NGO. Because again, you get up to give a presentation, you're asking your audience to believe you, to follow you, to do as you say, to go out there and act or believe differently. And if they can smell that you don't believe it, how can you possibly inspire and motivate other people? So I think, think about the great leaders, business, politics, that you all admire. These are people who knew what they stood for. You may have agreed or disagreed with them, but they knew who they were. They had that conviction. And that's something I think we all need to bring to our presentations.
Thank you, Terry. Now a personal question about yourself. You once wanted to be a lawyer, but ended up becoming a celebrated speechwriter. How did you make peace with that journey?
How did I make peace with it? Well, it was easy. I didn't get into law school, so I had no choice. I had to make peace with it. But yes, I came to college in Washington D.C. Like a lot of young people, wanted to be a lawyer. Studied for years. So I took the tests. Did not do so well. And then while I was sort of trying to figure out what to do, I got my first speechwriting job for our Secretary of Defense, and I really liked it. I loved it. I enjoyed it. It was hard. It was difficult. I almost quit once because I really was struggling. But I thought helping a leader find their voice, articulate their vision, their values, and to inspire other people and motivate them, for good, was something I thought this is a wonderful way to serve. This is a form of public service. And so, yeah, I mean, like that class, one door opens, another, one door closes, another door opens. Not getting into law school is probably the best thing that ever happened to me. At the moment, I was devastated and I wasn't sure where my path, but this is something I tell a lot of young people that, life is not going to go exactly the way you plan. You're not going to get every job. You're not going to get every promotion. And it hurts and it's hard, but there's so many opportunities out there. And I was very lucky to find one that brought me a sense of fulfillment.
Thank you. You tell some great stories in your book, Say It Well. One of the things I really liked was how you took a line from an Australian chauffeur and used that line, Aussie, 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 for President Obama to start a speech in the base when he was addressing the soldiers. So my question to you is, how open are you as a speechwriter to accepting other people's ideas when crafting a speech And give us other examples of things that you've done like this.
Yeah. Well, I think I share this in the book because I think it's whether, especially you're in an organization, a business, a company, a startup, there's a tendency sometimes when you're preparing a presentation to sort of only ask maybe your peers or maybe your superiors, what should I say? What should I talk about? And I think we forget sometimes that, good ideas come from everywhere. And often some of the best ideas come from our subordinates. The person at the front desk at the company, the janitor, the cleaning crew, the people who talk to everybody and see everything. Sometimes they have a much better sense of what's going on in an organization than maybe the CEO who's kind of up there in their office, right? So the story you're talking about is we were traveling with the president to Australia. He was going to give a big speech to a bunch of American and Australian troops. So we had the speech written, and we were in the motorcade, heading towards the event. And we didn't have a very good opening. There was, you like to grab your audience. You don't want to look. The moment you get up there, get them excited. We just didn't have that yet. And I had worked with our government experts in the Australian government and the American government, and I just couldn't come up with one. So I'm sitting there in the motorcade and just asked the driver. I said, I was out of I was out of options. I was desperate. Hey, I'm a speechwriter for the president. I'm looking for some exciting way to start the speech. And yeah, he said, oh, no problem. Just have him say Aussie, Aussie, Aussie. And I had never heard of this. I didn't know what this means. I didn't know if it was, maybe it's offensive. I don't know. And I said, well, what's gonna happen? He said, well, the whole audience is gonna erupt and they're gonna say, oi, oi, oi. And again, I'm an American. I have no idea what he's talking about. And he said, trust me, mate, trust me. It's gonna work. It's gonna work. And so, okay, we try. I did check with an Australian I knew, and they said, "Oh, that's an amazing idea." And sure enough, the president did it, and all the Australian, thousands of Australians just roared back at him, "Oi, oi, oi!" And the prime minister's smiling, and the president's smiling, and the troops are smiling, and the next day on the front page of the newspaper, that was the image, on the headline of the news, that was the image, and it's just a great moment of friendship between the two countries because we asked an unlikely place. An Australian car driver came up with a great idea for a presidential speech. To this day, maybe he was watching and saw it. I don't know, but I think it's just a great lesson for all of us to really look every direction, up, down, left, right, all over. When you're preparing a presentation, don't just sit in your little bubble of people who think and act and talk the way you do, or go to all parts of your organization. And so over time, I think I've become more open to that. I think all of us, one of the things I talk about is, we have to have humility when we prepare a speech or presentation. We do our best. We prepare something that makes sense to us. But if somebody tells you this doesn't quite make sense, or someone else has a better idea, I think a lot of our first instincts are to resist and get our backs up, and no one likes being told what to do. But I think we have to have humility. And someone gave me a piece of advice, another speechwriter once recently, that I now teach. I think it's a wonderful piece of advice. He said, when someone critiques you or gives you a suggestion that you may not want to hear, instead of starting from the presumption that you're right and they're wrong and why you shouldn't take their suggestion, flip it on its head and just assume that they're right and try it. And maybe it works and maybe it doesn't. But rather than, because you think of how many great ideas we lose in organizations, not just with presentations, but when you're developing new processes and programs, a lot of times we're just instinctively resistant to change or to criticism. But imagine if you just start from the presumption of the criticism is correct and it's your job to make it work. And more often, you may find it does work, but, and then at least try. And so that's kind of how I approach things now. I try to be more open. I mean, we used to get some crazy edits from, we would circulate a speech for President Obama around the White House, and, dozens of people would comment on it. And some of them were great edits. Some of them were insane. and we would not, and sometimes that led me to kind of be skeptical of all edits. And we shouldn't. We really should be humble and have an open mind. I encourage people to do that.
Fantastic. So my next question is about how you worked with President Obama. You say through your book that many times he would ask you, is this the best you can do? I'm sure you can do better, So I'm sure, you are writing a speech from your point of view, okay, imagining the audience, imagining the situation, etc. And President Obama is delivering the speech as well as doing it from his vantage point of view. So, question to you is, how did you handle differences of opinion between yourself and President Obama while writing a speech?
I'm so glad you asked it like that, because that's one of the most common questions I get. And I think there's actually a misperception in the public about what speechwriting really is. And so, if it's working correctly, if the speechwriter is really doing their job, they're actually not writing the speech from their point of view. They're writing the speech for the leader in their voice, their vision, their values. And so, I sought out the opportunity to work for President Obama because I admired him and I shared most of his views. And I knew that no one had elected me to do anything. When presidents get elected, they have tens of millions of people who vote for him. So you're a staffer. You're there to help the president. As speechwriters, we often say, our job is to write the speech that they would write if they only had time to write it themselves. So it's not my words, my vision coming out of his mouth. It's me trying as best I can, knowing how Barack Obama talks and thinks and approaches problems, to try to give him something so that he feels good about it. One of the best compliments you can get as a speechwriter is when someone says back to you, wow, this sounds like me. This feels like me. I want to give this, as opposed to, oof, this is your agenda, not mine. So that's sort of how we approach it. So the question you asked, though, is, well, what about differences? Sure. I mean, I don't think there's a person who worked for any president who agrees 100% with every single decision they ever made. I mean, just now we don't agree 100% with ourselves when we look back. I'm sure there are things Barack Obama would tell you he would do differently in the future. So, but I try to remember that, again, no one elected me to do anything. And I'm there to serve him and to help him make his best case for his policies. And, I was fortunate that, most of the time, the vast majority of the time, I was in alignment with him. And but listen, we see all the time, right, in politics and business and government, if you as a staffer find that you're actually out of sync with your boss more often than not, then you should leave, because they deserve, frankly, people who share their vision and their agenda, right? You need to be one team rowing in one direction at the same time. And it's uncomfortable for you if you don't agree with your boss or the organization a lot. And they deserve the best. So I would say there's no shame in leaving a job or an organization if you find that over time your values, your agenda, your vision diverge from one another. You should be at a place that you are excited to work for every single day, and that's what they deserve too.
Thank you. I'll move to a technology question now. Many people are using AI to write speeches now. What's your perspective on this trend?
Yeah. So I have two sort of big observations right now on this. And again, I'm not an AI expert, but I have spent almost 30 years trying to help humans communicate without machines. And I've spent a lot of time. I love going to the speech and watching how the audience reacts and observes. So my two big sort of takeaways are: listen, as a research tool, as a thought partner, as an assistant, as a co-pilot, whatever you want to call it, it's phenomenal, right? Like, if you need help brainstorming, you need help outlining, you need to find some interesting quotes, or which you have to check because it makes things up. If you write something that's too long, it can be a great editor. Cut it by 500 words. All these things that you might normally go and ask a coworker for. These are fun, interesting, helpful ways to use AI. I think the danger is when it comes time to actually write the words that you're going to communicate, you as a human being, to an audience of human beings who want a human connection, who want to be inspired, who want to know what's in your heart, what's in your soul, your vision, your values. I beg people not to use AI for that, because again, audiences don't want to hear from a robot. They don't want to hear a machine. They don't want to just see a human get up and read a script written by a machine. That's not why we're there. That's not why we take time out of our day to to come together, to sit in chairs, to listen to people. We want humans. And I think as AI takes over more and more parts of our life, I hope and I expect that people will crave those human moments even more, because so much of what we're getting is clearly generated by AI. You know, giving a toast to a colleague, eulogizing someone you love or admire, standing up at a community meeting to talk about a problem that affects everybody, you know, going to your house of worship, you know, all these sort of moments that are human moments in our human lives. I beg people, please don't do that. You know, your words, your voice are the most unique and important thing in your life. And so I beg people not to give their voice over to a bot.
Thank you. As a speechwriter, you've written, you know, thousands of speeches. How do you judge the effectiveness of a political speech? What would you use as maybe 3-5 measures to say that speech resonated, it went well? What would those measures be? Because they're reported, they're on television, etc. And then it takes sometimes 10 years for something to happen, like what John F. Kennedy said: we'll put a man on the moon and bring him back safely. It was not going to happen tomorrow morning. You know, so
Right.
how do you measure the effectiveness of a speech?
Right. I sort of have, yeah, I have about 3 ways that I think you can tell whether a speech has worked. And I think the first one is just in the moment itself, in the room. One of the reasons I liked being in the room when Obama gave so many speeches is because I wanted to see, was there that human connection that we were striving for? Was the audience excited? Did they listen? Did they cheer? Did they lean in when he was making an argument? Did they get up, did they experience the speech in the moment? Did they feel something in the moment? And so you can tell that if you're there. The speaker can tell. You can usually tell. Like you could, as a speaker, you're like, okay, this audience is not with me today, or this audience is, we're doing it. We're in it together. So in the moment, you just feel it. I think the second one is in the immediate hours, days, and weeks after a speech. Did you just give a presentation and it was forgotten immediately because it just didn't resonate with anyone? Or are people starting to talk about it? Are they sharing it online? Are they liking it? Is it going, I think when things go viral, that's a wonderful kind of modern way of having a metric. Well, this thing is really resonating with people. Is it spreading? Not only did people feel something when they heard it, when they watch it, they want their friends and family to feel it too. So they share it and then they share it. So that's another way to know. But I think ultimately the sort of the greatest measure of what makes up any sort of presentation, again, business, politics, NGO, is whether anyone actually does anything, right? We give these presentations, speeches, because we want people not just to hear ourselves talk. We do it because we want people to do something differently or believe something differently, to act in some way. And so if you give a great speech and everyone claps and wow, what a wonderful speech, and then just does nothing, that's a failure. But if they go out, they work harder, they put in extra hours, they come up with a new product or service, they build a better team, they go out there and they do something tangible, that to me is ultimately the greatest measure of a speech.
Fantastic.
Or any sort of presentation.
Thank you very much, Terry. You are, as always, fantastic in your articulation of the job, the profile, and all the challenges you had. I now hand it over to Indrajit for his, part. Yes, over to you, IG.
Thank you, Shiv. Thank you, Terry. That was a really rich and insightful conversation. But before we wrap up, we have a couple of questions from members of our Founding Fuel community, which I'll kind of quickly read out on their behalf. And the first question comes from Meetu Jaishankar. She's the communications advisor to the chairman at Wipro. And she wants to know, as a speechwriter, I sometimes grapple with the imposter syndrome, knowing that I will never have the same depth of knowledge or experience as the person I'm writing for. When you were writing for Barack Obama, how did you navigate that gap?
Yeah, no, I think that's something that a lot of people, especially in the speechwriting communications profession, feel. We always knew that Barack Obama was a phenomenal speaker before he ever had speechwriters. And so he was the, as he famously said once, say, I'm a better speechwriter than my speechwriters. And, kind of hurts our heart, but, he was right. So I think, listen, your job is to do the best you can. And I actually say, like, one part of that, say, I'll never know as much. I'm not sure. Like, listen, you when you have to craft a presentation or a speech, you probably think about that presentation and through your research, through your interviews. You spend more time thinking about that moment than even the speaker has, right? Because they're busy and they're doing lots of different things. And so you can actually know more about that moment and the expectations of that audience than the speaker does. And so I think one of the things that we often, when we prepare to write a speech for the president, say, okay, over the next week or two, we're going to become the world's greatest expert on this topic so that we can help the president navigate it. And this is something I do a lot of workshops, a lot of training sessions for companies, for organizations. This is one of the things that I walk them through, is how to actually help a speaker prepare for an event.
Terrific. Thank you for that. The next question and the last question is really from Ashok Nair. He's a coach and a wildlife photographer in Bangalore, leads a very interesting life traveling around the world. And he wants to ask, Terry, in your book, you make a strong case for bridging divides by appealing to shared values, rather than trying to convince others using arguments rooted in your own worldview, right? But in practice, this can take an extraordinary amount of time and effort. Like the example you cited, I think when it took, 7 hours for conservatives and liberals to sing from the same hymn book, as it were, in a world where people are so often divided by very fundamental disagreements, like, say, someone describing apartheid, right? How realistic is your approach, and where do you begin that conversation when there is no common ground?
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad that the way you just ended there. I'm so glad where there is no common ground. Someone said this to me once, and I just, I don't accept that. This is what I'm describing in the book are, the fact that every time we get up to speak, every time we post something online, every time we talk with our family or our colleagues or our neighbors, we have a choice to make about the kind of language we use. Are we doing it from a confrontational, aggressive, argumentative standpoint where we're just trying to, like, lash out at people and tell them how stupid they are and how uninformed they are, and if they would just see it our way, things would be, no one responds to that. We know that. Or are we choosing a different approach, a more civil approach, or choosing to try to understand how people have reached those views? Yeah, it does take longer time. And resisting language that divides people, dehumanizes people, demonizes people, judges them, presumes that they're of bad intent simply because they disagree with us. And I think we're seeing in countries all over the world what happens when leaders and citizens engage in that other type of kind of confrontational rhetoric all the time. It's incredibly divisive. It's incredibly disruptive, and it actually makes progress harder, whether it's in our companies, our communities, or our countries. And so the book is an appeal for a different way of communicating. And yeah, it's not just in one speech. It's just a whole mindset about how we communicate with our families, our friends, our neighbors, our colleagues, our fellow citizens. And I just don't think there's any other way. I think, look at what's happening in so many countries right now. It's exhausting and it's terrifying. But just to end on the point that the question ended on, what if there's no common ground? There's always common ground. Go anywhere in the world, talk to anybody from any background, and yeah, you may not speak the same language, you may not, have the same citizenship, but you are a human being, and you might be a father or a mother or a brother or a sister. You're a member of a community. You're a member of a faith community, and you want a good life for your family. You want education for your children. You want food on your table. You want to be treated with dignity and respect. You don't want to be judged and condescended to. That's common ground. These are basic aspirations that everybody feels. I think one of the reasons that, and I write about this in the book, that Barack Obama was so effective as a communicator is that, yes, he was an American. Yes, he spoke English, but he could go anywhere in the world and talk to any group of people Africa, South America, India, Asia, wherever, and connect with them because they had a fundamental respect for other human beings and a fundamental appreciation for the things that we share with one another. I think if we, as just fellow human beings, can embrace that spirit, God, the world would be such a different place. And that's one of the lessons, that messages that I try to share in the book.
Very wise words, and so attuned to the world in which we currently live.
Right.
So thank you, Terry, and thank you, Shiv, for such a thoughtful and engaging conversation. It was meant to be a conversation about communication and speech writing, but I think I've personally walked away with lessons of life lessons in some ways from this conversation. So we're deeply grateful on behalf of everyone at all of us at Founding Fuel. We'd like to express our gratitude for both of you for sharing your insights and experiences. We'd like to thank the Founding Fuel community also for the questions and for watching this when we publish it. I hope you found this conversation inspiring and full of practical takeaways, as it was for all of us who were part of this session. So until next time, this is Indrajit Gupta signing off from Founding Fuel Meet the Author series. See you soon again.